So I just got back from Inside Circle, and as I walked in here, I was like, felt like I was walking into a different reality. That's such a trip, that process. I also thought, like, man, this is what you guys have been doing all week. Although I've done it myself and facilitated and so forth, it's still every time it's just like, man, you never know what's going to happen. But the work is so potent and profound and powerful and deep. It's also simple, which is pretty cool. It just reinforces what I've learned through this work and through the work of realization and introspection and all of it. And that is, every individual knows where to go. Every individual knows how to go. There's innate knowledge. There's innate wisdom in the energetic body, which is accessed through what we feel to be the physical body. And that's it. I was watching these guys and gals, the 6 facilitators doing this work. And I was just thinking, man, this is masterful. Watching 4 of them who have been doing this for 25 to 30 years together, something like that, a long time. And just the cohesiveness and synergy of it all really is masterful. It's like nothing else I've ever seen. Probably like nothing else in the world, the way they function. So really cool. But at the same time, the work itself was simply done by each individual, just going where they needed to go, feeling what they needed to feel. And really the facilitators are just giving them permission to do it again and again. And that permission is really just an antidote for all of the, I don't know what you call the opposite of permission, but for all of the messages that we've received throughout our life, starting from early childhood and then at every stage of development, the messages we've received that it's not okay to feel, it's not okay to be truly authentic, it's not okay to emote, it's not okay to communicate what you're feeling with clarity, accuracy, and for the simple reason of just communicating it. Like the messaging that that's not okay is pervasive, right? And it's often overt communication when we're children, right? But it also becomes rather covert or kind of woven into the fabric of media and communication styles and interpersonal dynamics. Can even get woven into therapy and the relationship between a therapist and a client. The message there is often, I'm the one that's healthy, you're the one that's not. I'm going to show you where to go. And if you go too far, I'll get nervous, but I'll just tell you that you can't handle it. Is that naughty to say that? We all know it happens. There are, of course, good therapists. There are good therapists here. Someone who's done their own work, they won't have that obstruction, and they won't set up that obstruction for their client. But many, many, many people walking the face of this earth haven't done that kind of work, and it's innocent. But again, it's because of the messaging that you're not okay to feel. You're not okay to be however you already are. You're not okay to be childlike. You're not okay to be silly. It's not okay to feel anger. It's not okay to cry. It's not okay to feel fear. It's not okay to want what you want and all of it. So as we I guess, wrap up the talk series of this retreat. This is the 5th of 5 talks. It makes sense to touch on practicalities, touch on how do we take what we've cultivated here, what we've accessed here, what we've realized here, what we've learned about ourselves here, and in the Insight Circle and through the Q&As that you've done and the large group activities. People have gotten things out of all of these. How do you take that knowledge, information, realization, insight, and use it as your medicine going forward? I'm a believer in being clear on what your purpose is, in some sense. For instance, if I communicate something, and when I'm making videos or when I wrote a book, I'm clearly communicating something, but I felt it was important, and I actually have others to thank for this. Adyashanti is one of them, other sort of spiritual teachers and so forth. I gleaned things that they said about their interaction with their audience and so forth. And so from the beginning, I was, I guess, lucky enough to have the instinct or insight to sort of package the container of what I'm saying, and what I'm saying is what matters, but to package the container of it or the presentation of it with the purpose of why I'm saying it. So what I mean by that, just to be very clear, is when I talk about awakening, I'm already assuming that's what you're interested in. That's what I'm talking about. And here's what that means. And here are the risks of it. And here's what it's not. I said my whole first chapter is kind of like warnings and cautions, right? But that was very purposeful. And what the way that has served me is that almost every conversation, or I'd say damn near every conversation I have with anybody that I meet through YouTube, through these retreats, through email, from my online presence, through my book, the conversation is easy because my assumption's right, that the people who come and talk to me about this stuff are really interested in waking up. They may not be on the verge of it at the moment I'm talking to them, but they're interested. They know what I'm talking about, and that's why we're having the conversation. I think in many spiritual circles, it's not that clear. This has also been reinforced to me with like circling groups and authentic relating type groups, that if the intention of why we're actually doing, why we're all entering that group is not clear from the beginning, then it can be really muddy, meaning like sometimes it feels like not a lot happens. And in retrospect, I look at that and I kind of say, at least one big reason that is because the intention wasn't the same. People were coming to those groups for all different kinds of reasons. There's nothing wrong with that, but it in my experience, it makes things less potent. It makes it harder to go deep into truth, into discovery. So purpose in that way, that's what I mean by purpose. Being purposeful in what you're actually doing. Sometimes I will talk to somebody I feel confused or muddy in what they're presenting because I'm not really sure what they want. So I have to kind of ask, like, what is it you're after? You know, is it awakening? And if it is, what does awakening mean to you? Or is it what you think you're going to get out of awakening? And by investigating that, we can get to some kind of clarity and find out, what's going on, where the fixations are, if any fixations, how they want to go, what's most natural for them, where their instinct is, and touching into their instinct, and then moving through instinct to where they want to go. So that's the context for purpose that I'm going to talk about. So what I would encourage everyone here to do, and anyone who watches, say, the recording of this video, anytime you have a retreat, or you're on retreat, or you do a workshop, or you have a significant insight into something about yourself or life or reality or awakening or whatever it is. And this I learned from James McCleary. I'll give him credit. What is your medicine? What is that giving you? What are you going to take out of it? In a conversation with James, he did mention at one point, on occasion there'll be people who will go to circling events and these kinds of groups, Mankind Project, whatever, and they go consistently just to get the kind of emotional hit, and there's because it's a big release and a hit and so forth, dopamine release maybe, and you feel the connection and all of that happens. And it's wonderful. He said, but if you don't really connect it to your life in a practical way, like what does this mean? How am I going to take this medicine and carry it forward? How am I going to use this gift of what I discovered here to enrich myself and enrich my loved ones, and enrich those who I come into contact with, and enrich my environment, right? Then it can kind of stagnate. And I think the same thing can happen in retreats, right? You can go to a whole bunch of spiritual retreats and it feels great when you're there. Oh yeah, peace and samadhi, and it's experientially it can be really, really wonderful and very empty and so forth over time. At first it's often hard, but as you've been to a bunch of retreats, like it really starts to feel good to have that profound shared meditative state and experience. But it can stagnate too. My own Zen teacher, I remember once telling me, the ego is really adaptable. It can, at first it may not like a sesshin, like a Zen retreat, right? It's like, it's painful and you don't get much sleep and the food's kind of bland. He's like, but after a while, and he's sitting up in his Zazen posture. He's after a while, the ego just kind of goes, it's not so bad. Kind of settle in here. It's pretty quiet, no one's challenging me. The food's not too bad, and meditating. And so it's true, right? There's an adaptability to the ego structure. There's an adaptability to delusion. Honestly, the delusion we carry is rather adaptable, and it can find ways to entrench itself even in spaces and situations and so forth that are meant to actually uproot it. So one way to get past that is to really be clear on what your intention and purpose is with what you bring out of that retreat or that event, whatever that is. That I'll just call it the descent, right? This retreat is a descent, but there's other types of descents. What do you bring out of it? So I want to be clear and careful not to talk about intention in the way that I think it gets talked about in, say, like New Age circles and so forth, or law of attraction and so forth. That's not what I mean. This intention is really just a reflection and an acknowledgement of the gift you were given, and then a realignment of your life after that medicine has been given to you, and an acknowledgement of what that looks like. That's what I mean. It doesn't mean I'm going to use an intention to control my life, and here's my intention going into retreat, here's what I want out of it, and so forth. I mean, you went into the descent, you dismantled, you were dismantled, and as you come out, there's some insight there. Now, this doesn't have to happen every time, and I wouldn't get real heady about it, but if this rings true for you, especially if you've had some significant emotional insight or emotional shift, what is the medicine that comes out of that? When we did the archetypes workshop yesterday with James, I talked to people after. It was interesting because there were various reflections on it, some positive and some negative. I was a little surprised by the negative ones. A couple people said they didn't get anything out of it at all. I was like, oh, interesting. But I think the key with that kind of work, in the way he talks about the archetypes, you could think of it as totally intellectual, but it's not. That's not what he's talking about at all. If anyone here who has gone to the Inside Circle groups this week, you know what I'm talking about. He's talking about that. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about the archetypes that move through those spaces. They're powerful energies, right? And whether you know it or not, they move through your life. All of those archetypes move through your life: the lover, the magician, the sovereign, the warrior, and their shadow and their medicine. And that's what we're talking about. So yes, when I talk about purpose and what medicine you take out of a retreat and so forth, I'm talking about the relative aspect. I am, yes. But as the relative and absolute aspects become more and more interpenetrated, I think it's something that you are, it would be detrimental to ignore is the relative aspect. And how do you work with the relative aspect, being established in the absolute? Well, the archetypes are a really good way to do it. These energies that are unmistakable. When you watch the work that's happening when you're doing the inside circling process, it's unmistakable. There's no, you feel it. You feel the whole room feels what's happening, right? It's like one giant organism moving, and it's powerful work. It's unmistakable. So that's what I mean by archetypal energies. Like, this isn't heady stuff. This is energetic stuff. This is energetic, right? This is the energetics of the relative. So, what is your medicine? What did you take out of this retreat? What did the insight that occurred during the holotropic breathwork session? What insight did I give you about yourself, about your shadow, and about your medicine? Was it in the warrior space? Was it the warrior archetype that you gained an insight about? The gateway emotion, the barrier emotion is the clue. Oh, okay, here's what I wanted to say. If you don't get what that workshop was about yesterday, like if it's just like there's a disconnect there, then I would suggest there's a disconnect at the emotional level, because the archetypes are truly directly related to the emotion. So the warrior is directly related to anger. That's the archetype. If you know anger, you know the archetype, right? And if you don't have a good relationship with anger, like maybe you repress anger, you aren't in touch with anger, you're not in touch with your anger, or you don't have good boundaries, then you're not in touch with that warrior archetype, and you're not clear on when you're in your medicine and when you're in your shadow. And if you're not clear when you're in your shadow, if you're aware of when you're in your shadow, you're in a good place. If you're unaware of when you're in your shadow, you can be in a really bad place, in the sense that you could cause harm to yourself and others. That's the key to the whole thing, right? That's what we're talking about with this. So when I say, what is your medicine, or what did you take out of whatever shift occurred, or whatever insight occurred, or whatever a big emotional breakthrough you had, regardless of which workshop it was during, or if it was not during a workshop, feel into that. There's a reason I had James do his workshop on the last day of the large group workshops, aside from the Q&A that we're doing today, because it does kind of, everything culminates in that. And the lessons that you can take away that are in the relative aspect are going to be along those lines. They're going to be somewhere in the emotion body. And give yourself that gift. Give your family that gift. Give the world that gift of finding that realignment in whatever element was realigned for you. I'm sure of it. Everyone here had some element of one of those archetypal energies realigned during this. Everyone did, and maybe multiple, right? Did you learn what it feels like to be in the shadow of anger? Did you learn what it feels like to be in the medicine of anger? Did you feel what it felt like? Everyone here knows what it feels like to be both in the shadow and medicine of the magician, certainly, right? This whole thing is about transformation. This whole, the archetype of this retreat, the archetype of the retreats I do is really the magician archetype, largely. Yeah. So we know those energies, but it can be really helpful, because I think we all have a lot of facility in that space, that magician archetype. Can be really helpful to know what can send you into deep shadow, right? Like dissociation. We've had conversations about dissociation. And when you are aligned into your medicine in the magician, which will feel like an alignment in the other archetypes. It'll feel like an alignment when you're in your medicine with the lover, and when you're in your medicine with the warrior. Then the magician has the strength, the fortitude, and the consistency and the stamina to continue to take one more step into the unknown, right? And why are you doing that? So without that, right? So to back up a step, without having that warrior strength backing it to some degree, you can just have such a terrified experience and even a dissociative experience that you're clueless. You don't know where to go. There's massive confusion, disorientation. But with some of that warrior energy, you can take the next step and the next step and the next step into the unknown. You can walk yourself right to the edge of that cliff, right? And with the lover is the devotional side of things when we talk about spirit, right? So with that lover, if the lover energy, the lover archetype is in its medicine, then you have the care for yourself, care to get to the root of suffering, care for the world, the love and the care and compassion that says, I have to do this work. I have to do this work because I've hurt myself and I've hurt others by not doing it, by being unconscious. Unconsciousness is no longer okay because it's not in alignment with my compassion. It's not in alignment with my heart. That's the lover archetype. And if that's in its medicine and the warrior archetype's in its medicine, then you have the courage and the heart to step truly into the unknown. And that's where the magician leads you. Into the unknown that's not dissociated. Into the unknown that's not shadow. Into the unknown that's the medicine, right? That's what we talk about when we're talking about awakening. So there's an alignment that sets us up for that with other aspects of our life. I think Osho said, others have said this, but I think Osho said it in this way. You have to have a strong ego to get to the point where you want to deconstruct the ego, right? So sometimes we need to take care of certain aspects of our life before we kind of have the stability to really walk into the unknown. Paul Hederman has said, like, for instance, if there's a severe addiction or something in your life, maybe you should put the fire on the roof of your house out before you start looking at awareness or awakening or whatever. And that's true, right? So there are practical considerations, but what that looks like in the energetic model I'm talking about is alignment into your medicine. So that's why it's helpful to know all of these spaces. So if it was unclear what James was doing yesterday, this is what he was doing. He was showing you to not overlook certain aspects of yourself. I have noticed that some people are really comfortable with a certain emotion, like, say, anger, but they're not comfortable with sadness at all. They're not comfortable with grief, or maybe not even familiar with it. On the other hand, there are people who are familiar with grief and comfortable with grief and maybe experience grief quite a bit, but they're really not comfortable with anger. So this is the kind of thing that happens where, and this is how identity is, right? Identity is, it's kind of a misalignment, actually, in a sense. Identity emphasizes one thing and overlooks another. Or I could call it view. View sees what it sees, and it can't see behind itself, right? And so this is where inquiry comes in. This is where all this shadow work stuff I talk about comes in, the multimodality approach. It's for this. It's to see what we couldn't see before. The relational work, with the inside circle facilitators, they're great at that. They'll find what you're not quite seeing, and then you'll be surprised that that's actually where you wanted to go in the first place, right? So when we go into the descent and we come out, which that's analogous to leaving this retreat or this conference, what we're taking with us is something we didn't see before. That's the shadow. And when we do see it, that's the medicine. It's that simple. The relationship between shadow and medicine are just two sides of the same coin, as James described. So that's my challenge to everyone here, is just to find, it could be the simplest thing. It could be a decision you have to make in your life or something you have to address, or it could just be some very simple thing like, I care. I care far more than I knew I did, or who knows, or I have a talent I was totally unaware of. Or it could be something you can't put into words at all. It's going to be whatever it is, it should be here, right? You should be able to find it in your body. But it may just be a sense of ease, right? It may be a complete opening to one of those emotional energies you weren't open to before, like anger in a very different way. Anger in the way of like boundary setting and strength and so forth, where you weren't comfortable with it before because you thought it was going to hurt somebody, so you repressed it, and now you're like, no, actually, I can feel that. I can feel that energy of the warrior, and I don't need to repress it, and it's not going to hurt someone because I'm in alignment with my heart, with the lover, right? So each of these archetypes gives the other archetypes permission to come into fruition and to be in their medicine as well. So you may have just found joy. Many people actually did. There was a bit of a theme of that. I've noticed that many people have just moved into joy. Many people have moved into ease. Many people have discovered that they can actually be playful and silly. People here. That doesn't have to be your medicine, but I've seen it several times this week. And that's more than enough, right? The gateway emotion for the sovereign is joy. The medicine is a good relationship with joy, which leads to abundance, which leads to good caretaking and strength and leadership and balance in life and a life well lived. So don't overlook the possibility that just opening to joy or opening more to joy or feeling at ease, just enjoying your life, is more than enough medicine. It spills over, to everyone around you.